Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Motor City Roar podcast. I am your host, Josh Norman, Detroit sports enthusiast and overall lover of anything sports in general, except curling. I will never figure that one out. So, why am I doing this podcast? Well, I have been a Detroit sports fan since 2008. And if you know anything about the year 2008, that was not a great year for Detroit sports. Um, Specifically because the Detroit Lions went 0-16 in 2008. Now, for most people, uh, that would be a complete turnoff to anything Detroit sports. However, for me, it actually got me more invested in the game of football and following the Detroit Lions. I don't know why, just the way it worked out. Following year, we drafted Matthew Stafford. I really became a fan there. I've always been a fan of baseball. I played baseball growing up. I've always been a fan of the Tigers. I followed their entire run up to the World Series in 2013. I followed everybody like Justin Verlander, Miguel Cabrera, those guys throughout pretty much their entire careers. Wings, I followed them when they went to the Cup back in 2008, again 2009, and the kind of the dominance of the Pavel Datsyuk, Henrik Zetterberg areas. Haven't followed as close, but I'm starting to get back into that, especially with us almost making the playoffs this past year. Pistons, I'm not a huge Pistons fan, honestly, to be honest. More of a Golden State Warriors fan, but I think that's fair given the current state of the Pistons at the moment. But my basketball background, I have followed roughly the NBA for a couple of years. Not super into it, but I have followed it. So that's kind of my credentials in a way of making this podcast. I'm not just a guy who started following sports yesterday. I have a deep passion and love for all four of those sports that I just mentioned, and other sports too. But those are the main ones that I focus on, and especially being from Detroit, those are the four ones we have. And I am a diehard fan for all of our teams. I might not make it out to games a whole lot, but I am there rooting, listening to games, following them on my phone, and listening to them. So that's why I want to make this, is because I have a lot of opinions about Detroit sports. I love to talk about Detroit sports, and so I wanted to get some of those opinions out and kind of share them with you guys. So that's just a long introduction to say that I love Detroit sports and I love sports in general. So this podcast will not solely be Detroit sports, although that will be the focus. I will also incorporate other sports and kind of go around the leagues, what's popular and what's going on right now. Um, the way that I'm kind of going to schedule this podcast, my plan is to release once a week. Mondays is what I'm looking for the target. I start school in a few weeks, so we'll see how my schedule adjusts to that. But I think Monday mornings will be pretty good, especially with the Lions playing on Sundays most days. I'll probably do my recording after that game, kind of give a breakdown of the game, and then release that on Monday. Also with Michigan playing over the weekend, I'm a Michigan fan, so with Michigan playing over the weekend, might recap that as well. Not quite sure the full scope of everything that I'm going to be doing with this, but I'm going to have a good time doing it. I hope you guys will have a good time listening to it. And yeah, this is going to be about 45 minutes to an hour of just straight sports talk. So for you sports lovers out there, this is right up your alley. Each episode, I'll kind of focus on the sport that's in season at that moment. So right now, it would be baseball, and I'm going to wrap football in that as well because preseason is going on right now. And then I'll do an overview if there's any notable things that happened in the sports that aren't in season right now, or if there's anything else outside of the four sports I listed that's kind of major. I'll briefly go over that as well. But again, this podcast will basically focus on the four major sports. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. I want to go ahead and start with the NFL and with specifically the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions just had their second preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City the other day. That is the second one in the books. First game was against the Giants. Now, I'll be honest, I don't always pay attention to preseason, only because it really has no bearing on the season as a whole. More often than not, you're not playing your starters that are going to start week one of the season. You're playing guys who are your second and third string guys who are fighting for roster spots. There's 53 players that make up an NFL roster. You have to fill all 53 players with guys that are going to help you throughout the season. So the preseason is a really good chance for, if you play your starters, to get a final tune-up. But more often than not, for the second, third, fourth quarters, you're playing guys that are fighting for a roster spot. Entering the NFL preseason, for those of you that don't know, every team starts with 80 players. And by, let's see, I have the date written down here somewhere. August 27th, the teams have to narrow that 80 down to 53. You have to have 53 by August 27th. So the preseason games are an opportunity for coaches to see guys who are going to give them depth throughout the season. If a starter goes down, you want to know that there's a guy who's going to be at least equal, maybe a little less, but at least equal in skill and talent, and be able to execute the game plan that you have just as well as your starter. You don't want a guy who's not ready to take the field or doesn't understand the system or isn't willing to work hard backing up your starter. That's just not a smart game plan. So that's in a synopsis what the preseason is about. And so far, there's been a lot of good from the preseason so far, a lot of not so good too. But again, that's where you kind of weed it out. So who for me are kind of the standout performers, both on offense and defense of this Lions team? Guys to watch going forward, guys who probably will end up making the roster at this point, with only one preseason game to go. That'll be next Saturday. We play Pittsburgh, so it'll be interesting to see, kind of some of these position battles, how they shape up. Rosters starting to come together, but these guys that I'm about to go through, really, really two parts to it. Number one, these guys have really been playing really well throughout the preseason. The first two games they played really, really well. So shout out to those guys. Secondly, this speaks to Brad Holmes, our GM, and just the process he goes through to pick each individual player as a guy who's going to fight for this team, who's going to play hard for this team no matter what the score is, no matter what position we're in, no matter if we're 5 games out of the playoffs or if we've already clinched a playoff spot. These guys are going to play hard. Out of the 6 guys I'm about to name, 4 of them are undrafted free agents. And what that means is these players didn't get drafted. So they all the players that aren't drafted in the NFL draft are put into a giant pool of free agents. And any team can go in and sign one of those players to a minimum contract. Normally those players are just signed for training camp, and then they're released or put on the practice squad. But sometimes they do make a roster, and it's a big deal when they do, because these are guys that they weren't viewed as good enough to make. I think there's 256. I could be wrong on that number. Draft picks. So they were good enough to make that cut, but they managed to make an NFL roster. So 4 of the 6 guys I'm about to mention are undrafted free agents, which really speaks to Brad Holmes' ability to find these guys after the draft and not, necessarily take them with the draft pick, but get them after, find quality guys. Like I said, guys that are going to play and produce for this team. So on the offensive side of things, my number one guy right now is Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker was drafted by the Lions in 2023 out of Tennessee as a quarterback, and he has looked really, really impressive in the 2 games so far. His ability, he's a very mobile quarterback, as opposed to Jared Goff, who more likes to sit back in the pocket, throw the ball. Hendon Hooker gives a dual threat option, so he can run the ball, he can pass the ball, and he's been doing both very, very well. So far in 2 games, Hendon Hooker passing wise, 12 of 15, 150 yards, no touchdowns yet, but I think a 70 something percentage. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, 70.8 completion percentage. That is really, really good. It means he's making smart decisions with where he's going with the ball. He's not trying to force the ball at all. And then running wise, he also has 9 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. So really able to just do both and kind of just let give another depth to our offense there. The second guy that I want to mention is Sion Vaki. Sorry, Sion Vaki. We drafted him in the 5th round this past year, 4th or 5th round. He in college he played both safety and running back. We're using him specifically as a running back. We have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery as our 1 and 2. So there's kind of a battle for our third string running back with him and Craig Reynolds. I wouldn't mind personally carrying 4 running backs like that. That gives you a lot of options in case there's injuries or whatever the case may be. And just as an offense, it gives you a lot of different looks you can do plays wise. But Vaki has looked really impressive running the ball. 10 carries, 51 yards. That might not sound like a lot, but you have to remember in preseason, everything is a much smaller sample size. So whereas in the regular season, guys may be getting, 14 carries a game, 15 carries a game, running for 160 yards. In the preseason, you might get 5 carries, you might get 4 carries, you might get 3 plays to prove that you belong in an NFL roster. That's why the preseason can be exciting for some of these guys, or can be exciting and is important for some of these guys because you never know how many opportunities you're going to be able to get in order to show your skills. And the really cool thing about it is even if say you are on the preseason roster for the Lions and you don't make the team, another team may see a play that you made and say, hey, we want that guy here, we think he fits in nicely with our system, we have a spot open for him, and they may sign him. I know that happened a few years ago with one of our receivers. Went over to New York as kind of their 5th string guy, I think. Didn't get a lot of playing time, but he made the roster strictly because of his performance with the Lions. So, it's really cool to see. But going back to Vaki, we're using him specifically as a running back, and he's had a couple of impressive longer runs this year, but really just good at finding the hole behind the offense and just letting the offensive lineman work in front of him, waiting for that hole to develop, and then shooting the gap. A lot of speed, able to kind of change speeds really quick, which as a defender is an absolute nightmare. And the third guy I want to talk about is kind of the most excited guy I'm most excited for, just because he plays at a position that's really, really not weak, but there's not a strong presence behind your first 2 guys, and that's wide receiver. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Jameson Williams. Those 2 guys are really going to carry a lot of the workload, I feel. Behind that, it's kind of up for grabs. You have Khalif Raymond. You lost Josh Reynolds in the offseason. So you have Khalif Raymond. That's probably your wide receiver 3. But you don't really have another big guy. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones. So he's going to be there as well. But the guy that I'm really excited for is Isaiah Williams. Isaiah Williams was one of these undrafted free agents from this past offseason. And he has gone absolutely insane in the preseason right now. 10 catches for 106 yards. No touchdowns. But what also stands out to me is his dual ability as not only a receiver, but as a kick returner. For those of you that don't know, they changed the way that the kickoff structure is run this year. And probably next episode, I'll kind of dive into that and just kind of explain how that whole thing works. But with it, it allows for more quote unquote electric returns. And so Williams has been really, really good. Had a 28-yard return the other day, which on this new system is one of the longer returns so far. So just the ability he has to be a big body downfield, to get open, to provide a target for Goff, maybe as a 4th string guy, but having that kind of receiver room isn't as bad as I think a lot of people are making it out to be. A lot of people are saying, oh, Lions don't really have a receiving room. Oh, Lions aren't going to be good at receiver this year. Who's going to catch? Listen, I'm not a coach or anything, but having a guy like Isaiah Williams as your fourth or fifth string receiver, that's a pretty good place to be in. Just as a coach, you have to be excited that you can have a guy like this who can play the way he has. He's a little bit on the shorter side, but he's very, very explosive as a receiver, and he'll be a good target for Goff should he make this roster. Which, based on everything that I've seen so far, again, I'm not a coach, I'm not a scout, but he should make this roster. I'd be surprised if he's one of the ones to get cut. And then the defensive side of things, I'll just go through these. Brandon Joseph, an undrafted free agent from last year, was on our roster last year, kind of getting a second opportunity to get more playing time this year. Has been really impressive, had a nice interception the other day. 8 tackles so far in the preseason. And he's just been flying to the ball. Very good play recognition, knows where he's going. Kind of able to recognize the play as it's developing, and overall just be a stud on the backside of the defense there. Additionally, I want to make sure I get this name right. Oh, Matthew Betts. Matthew Betts is one of my favorite players that we signed in the offseason here. He was a Canadian football player last season, won the award, the Canadian Football League award for most outstanding linebacker or defensive player. I'd have to double check that. But very interesting coming over from the Canadian Football League. I don't know if there's been many players, if any, that have done that. But the Lions liked him, saw the guy, and are bringing him in as a defensive end. And he has looked very, very impressive in the preseason. Got a sack the other day, and has been just overall being a nuisance on the defensive line. And the last guy is Abraham. I'm probably going to butcher this, but Abraham Buplan as a linebacker. Kind of will slot in as a depth guy, not going to be a starter, but he has been very impressive in the middle of the defense right now. Been able to lock up the run, hasn't overcommitted himself and put himself out of position. And based on what I've seen, should be making this roster. So that's kind of my rundown of the Lions' first 2 preseason games. Last game is next Saturday, which is the 24th, I believe. And then like I mentioned earlier, the roster deadline is August 27th, so 3 days after that. So this is kind of the final tune-up and chance to prove for a lot of these players. But those are my 6 guys that I think have stood out the most. And I think Hooker is obviously making this roster as our QB2. But the other 5 guys that I mentioned, they should be making this roster. I'd be surprised if any of them got cut. So that's kind of everything Lions right now. It's kind of a little bit of a downtime in the NFL. But I do want to do a segment I'm going to call 2-minute drill. And this is just a very quick segment, about 2 minutes, where I'm just going to take a topic in the NFL and I'm just going to run with it and talk, no pun intended, run with it and talk about it for 2-ish minutes, and just kind of give you guys some more insight on something going on in the NFL. So this one is on QB battles. Personally, I'm a big fantasy guy. I'm probably looking at 5, maybe 6 leagues this year with friends, and then 1 or 2 just for my own personal benefit with random people. But I am very intrigued. The quarterback position is one of the most important positions, and there's 5 noteworthy quarterback battles. So I'm just going to go down the list and kind of give my 2 cents on who I think will win the starting job based on what I've seen so far and just based on prior knowledge. So the first one is we're going to go out to Denver, where the battle is between rookie Bo Nix and Jared Stidham. Bo Nix was drafted this year with the 10th overall pick. going over there to play for Sean Payton as they try to find a replacement for Russell Wilson. Um, Personally, I think Nix has the edge. I think he's shown more in preseason and just coming off college. Jared Stidham has never really done well in the NFL. He's done well enough to stay around, be a backup, but he's never really done well. So I'm going to give the edge to Nix in that situation. The second one I have on my list is actually one that's already wrapped up. Happened in Vegas between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. I think it was announced yesterday or today that Gardner Minshew did end up getting that starting job. That is going to be a interesting QB spot over there in Vegas. Um, there's a lot of targets to go around there. Vegas loves to throw the ball. So I'll be interested to see how Gardner Minshew fits into that offense. But as of now, he is the QB1. Going East Coast to New England, Drake May, Jacoby Brissett. Drake May, number 3 overall pick in this year's draft. New England, first-year head coach. Not a lot of talent over there on the roster. So that being said, I actually am giving this one to Jacoby Brissett. I think he has the veteran experience. I think we may see May at some point during this season, but I would hold off on drafting Drake May until it is clear that New England is going forward with him as quarterback. Personally, I believe that Brissett will win that starting job. I think he's the better overall QB at the moment. But I think that Drake May will at some point see the field this season. Fourth battle. Not really a battle at the moment, only because there's not a second person involved. But Minnesota Vikings just lost J.J. McCarthy, their rookie quarterback, for the entire season. That being said, they currently have Sam Darnold slated as the QB1. I don't know if Minnesota is confident with Sam Darnold as the QB1. As a Lions fan, I'm absolutely confident if Sam Darnold is their QB1. However, as an NFL fan, I do not know if you want to go your entire season with Sam Darnold as your QB1. I just don't know if that's the road that you want to take, especially if you want to retain players like TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison down the road. I don't think that's the best way to build your team. I could be proven wrong. Sam Darnold could come out and have a very good year. He could be a top 15 quarterback. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I'm not confident in that happening. So, that being said, if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, I'm looking for a quarterback to come and battle against Sam Darnold for this opening spot. Now, I'm going to throw out a name. It's going to be a little controversial. Do I think it would work? Possibly. We'll see. I think if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, I'm going out and signing Ryan Tannehill. Now, I know that Ryan Tannehill has not been impressive the last few years. But when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson on your roster, all you need your quarterback to do is throw the ball. That's all you need. You need a guy who can be somewhat reliable with the football, who's not going to turn it over a lot. And that's what Ryan Tannehill has done. Was he a stellar quarterback at Tennessee? No. He also didn't have a lot of weapons around him. He had Derrick Henry in his backfield, but he did not have a lot of weapons around him over the last few years. Does he turn the ball over? No. Can he be accurate? Yes. Is he better than Sam Darnold? Well, we'll see. But if I am the Minnesota Vikings, I am looking for a replacement. Not a replacement. Someone to battle against Sam Darnold with. And lastly, Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both recently acquired this offseason. Russell Wilson from Denver, as I mentioned earlier. Justin Fields from the Bears, kind of a bad situation there where they just wanted him gone as they brought in Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick. I'm giving this edge to Russell Wilson. I don't see any reason why Justin Fields would be the starting quarterback, but it's Pittsburgh. You never know. They're going to do something crazy this season. Do I think that we'll see Justin Fields as the QB1 sometimes this season? Maybe. Who knows? But unless Russell Wilson has a bad year, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be the starting quarterback come week 1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's the 2-minute drill for this week. I'll be back with another segment of that next week. Hopefully, we'll see. But preview of next episode, I will kind of break down where I see the Lions 53-man roster resting, and also do a schedule prediction of the Lions season, and just kind of see where I have them landing and how far I have them going for the next season. So that's going to wrap up the NFL portion of this podcast. I'm going to break things up a little bit here, and I'm going to pull out a fabulous factoid while we're still on the topic of NFL, before we pivot for 1 second. There was a map released that showed what NFL team each state thought would win is rooting for, I should say, in this upcoming season. And the results are very interesting to me. Kansas City Chiefs, number 1, reigning Super Bowl champs back-to-back. Still got Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, a lot of superstars over there. 18 states thought that the Kansas City Chiefs are rooting for the Kansas City Chiefs to repeat again as Super Bowl champs. San Francisco, who lost in the Super Bowl, 8 states there. Bunch of teams with 1, 2, but what stood out to me was there are 9 states that are rooting for the Detroit Lions to win the Super Bowl this year. I find that interesting. We have the second most states rooting for it. Now, one of those is Rhode Island, so I don't know. You could get a little iffy there. But second most. I thought that was really interesting. Other teams, Buffalo, Cincinnati with 2, Baltimore with 4, and then Miami, Dallas, Houston, Green Bay, Philly, and the Jets all with 1. Most of those were their home states. So that is the fabulous factoid of episode 1. I'll be back with another one next week. And before I transition to the next thing, you can find me on Instagram at Motor City Roar. No capitals, all lowercase. I'll be posting updates from episodes, snippets from episodes over there. So if you want to go over there, check it out. Additionally, that's where you can post any questions that you guys have, any topics you guys want me to cover. You guys can DM me on there. And yeah, I will try to incorporate your questions and your comments into my episodes. And we'll see where this whole thing goes. So moving on to baseball, which is kind of, we're kind of in the thick of it right now. We got about a month and a half of baseball remaining. Tigers. I have been hearing a lot of mixed reactions about the Tigers. Some people are decently happy with the season. Some people have completely given up. Some people gave up in May. Where do I stand with the Tigers? I never had high expectations for the Tigers this year. And I have been telling people that from day one. I told them that last year. The key thing for me right now with the Tigers is we haven't been good since 2016. You can either rush to rebuild this roster, or you can take your time, build guys through the farm system, and create something that's homegrown and that's not going to cost you $1 billion. Now, do I think that we shouldn't at least be competitive? Absolutely not. Am I expecting us to compete for a World Series this year? No. Next year? No. 2 years? Maybe. The number one thing for me with this Tigers team is progress. Are you seeing the guys that you're expecting to be the future of this roster? Are you expecting them to kind of take that next step to get in the MLB and produce? Now, There is one thing that bugs me with most people with the Tigers, is people think that we have a guy who's highly rated. He will immediately come up to the MLB and start hitting 300 and hit a home run every other game and be the cornerstone of this offense, and our offense will shoot off. That's not realistic in the slightest. Like I said, I played baseball growing up, and I know that the number one thing that will help you improve your game is live in-game practice, live in-game repetitions. You can do all the drills you want, but until you get in the batter's box facing an actual pitcher in a game where the nerves are there and the crowd's cheering you on, you will not understand what it's like to be in that situation. So there are a lot of guys that the Tigers have on this roster that are very, very young. It's only their first year, second year in the league. They will get there with time. Now, are there guys that come up from the minors and immediately hit it off and never drop off for the rest of their careers? Then they have a 10-year, 12-year career, and they're good every second of it. Absolutely. Is that the average? No. No, it's not. So, for all the Tigers fans listening, for all the guys that have given up, for all the people that have given up on the Tigers, I say this to you. And these words, these three words, as a Detroit sports fan, I know you don't want to hear it, but you need to hear it. And that is, give it time. Give it time. This is not a process that you can just rush overnight. This is not something that all of a sudden we're going to wake up tomorrow and we're going to be World Series contenders. We had our last good season in 2016, and we did not build this team the correct way to follow things up. It has been 12 years since we went to the World Series, and we did not build this roster to last for the future. So this is the start of ramping up. And compare where we were at now to where we're at 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we're in a much better spot. And a lot of these rookies, as I mentioned, have been showing improvement. Has it been drastic? No. But you've had guys that 2 years ago were struggling to hit the ball that are now hitting the ball. You have pitchers that 2 years ago finished around 500 with a 3 ERA that are now one of the best pitchers, some of the best pitchers in the league. So take into account the process of baseball and take a step back. This is going to be a painful process. It already has been. But things are looking up. Not everything is based off of the win-loss record. So my PSA to Tigers fans is to let it ride. I know it's difficult. I know you want things to happen right now, but just let it ride. Give it a little bit of time. Now, if something doesn't happen, if we don't make the playoffs, genuinely, okay, so let me go back to where I'm at right now. Genuinely, I think we could make the playoffs next year. Genuinely, I think we could make the playoffs next year. I don't think I'm crazy in saying that either. Genuinely, I think we could make the playoffs next year. Not necessarily win the division, but you take some time in the offseason, you go out and get some pitching, you go out and you get a bat or two, and you have a legit shot at making the playoffs next year. Year after that, who knows? Now, if those things don't happen, if you take a step back next year, then things need to talk about. Then we can start getting upset. But don't get upset when you have people who are trying to work with a process. Not to mention the fact that the current GM and administration are trying to undo some of the things that the previous administration did. That takes time too. That's not just an overnight, oh, we don't want this guy or this guy or this guy anymore. There's limits and structure to this. So, that being said, at the moment, based on a website called Fangraphs, the Tigers have a 0.8% chance. That is less than 1% chance of even making the playoffs. We're currently 9 games back in the wild card at the time that I'm recording this. We have roughly 38 games to go, sitting at 4 games under 500. Do I see us making the playoffs this year? No. But before the season, I said my goal for this season is 86 and 76, 5 games above 500. Do I think that is doable based on how we're playing right now and where we're at? Absolutely. The number one thing I've seen with this team over the last couple of months is, and it's modeled after what the Lions are doing, is this team does not give up. They can go down 3-1 into the 9th inning and they will keep battling. They're not just going to, throw down the towel. They're not just going to give up. I know it's frustrating when we score 0 runs or 1 run and we give up 4. But this team does not quit. There's a certain aura of not willing to give up and not willing to back down. And I've seen them come from behind multiple times this season. So, that being said, I think 5 games over 500 is very attainable, and it's a step up for next year. So, who are some guys that I think are hot right now, and who are some guys that I think are not? This is going to be a segment that I will bring back multiple times on this podcast, the hot and not segment. 3 guys that I think are really hot right now and playing really well, and 3 guys that I think are not playing really well right now. So this is going to be, for this segment, it's going to be focused on the sport that's in season. So I'm not going to include NFL. I'll include NFL guys once NFL goes in, but it'll be the sports that are in season or in their biggest portion of the year. So if there's multiple sports going on, I'll kind of pick one. I might expand it to 4 or 5 depending on how many sports are going on at the moment. Right now, I'm going to focus on baseball. So who are my hot? Who's hot right now? Kerry Carpenter, number 1. Just came back from injury 4 games ago. Since then, batting 5 for 16, 3 home runs, a lot of power. Kind of reinvigorated this offense. The team has been playing a whole lot better since he came back from injury. Number 2, out of the bullpen, Tyler Holton, pitcher, had a streak going of roughly 23 innings where he hadn't allowed a run. I know that was broken the other day, but he has been dominant when he has been on the mound. Very, very good pitcher out of the bullpen. And number 3, starting pitcher, calling it now, Cy Young winner, AL Cy Young winner, 2024, Tarek Skubal. Skubal has been one of the most lights out pitcher this entire season, and it's frankly not really even close. At the time of this recording, currently boasting a 2.53 ERA, which I believe is one of the top marks in the league. 14-4, which is very, very good. Getting into a few more of the nitty gritty stats. 180 strikeouts, which at the moment leads the league. Made his first All-Star appearance this year. So this guy has been very, very dominant, very, very lights out, keeping walks at a minimum. Like I said, striking out a lot. Only 29 walks in this season. That is very impressive. For those of you that don't know how impressive that is, just take my word that is extremely impressive. Having only 29 walks to 180 strikeouts, that is showing immense and incredible control. That is not something that's very simple to do. That means that you're getting a lot of your pitches right around the strike zone, but you're doing it in a way where batters aren't able to hit it, thus the 180 strikeouts. So very good control, limiting the amount of hits, limiting the amount of runs. Teams do not hit for a lot of power against him. So Tarek Skubal is a guy that has been kind of lights out. Opponents are batting 198 against him this season. Anything under 200 is amazing. Anything under really 250 as a pitcher is amazing. That means out of every 10 times a batter is getting up to bat against Tarek Skubal, they're only getting hit two times. that is really, really good. And it's exciting that we have that kind of pitcher playing for us right now. So those are my three hots. Now who's not? Who's not hot? Now for this one, just the way it worked out, they're all pitchers. All pitchers. Number one for me, Joey Wentz. Joey Wentz is one of our starters and has just not looked very sharp over the last 4 or 5 outings he's had. Currently hovering around a 5.22 ERA. That's not great for a pitcher. Lower strikeout rate. Just overall getting hit too often. Almost even strikeouts to hits. That's not a very good sign as a pitcher. Not something you want to see. Number 2, Shelby Miller, one of our bullpen guys. Has his flashes where he's good, but for the most part, boasting a 5.36 ERA. He's been in too many situations where he's needed to get outs and he just can't. Definitely not a long-term solution for us in the bullpen. Kind of a guy right now who's just there to tie over for a season or two, but not extremely impressive in his last couple outings. And the last guy, I think a lot of Tigers fans will agree with me on this, is Kenta Maeda. One of our off-season signings, boasting the worst ERA on the team, 6.18. 101 hits to only 71 strikeouts in just 90 innings of work. That is not a good stat line to have at all. Low strikeout rate, 71, like I said. But Maeda's a guy that's started out as a starter, transitioned to a reliever over the last few months, and is good for about 3 innings. And then after that 3rd inning, it is 50-50 as to whether or not he will be the same pitcher he was for the first 3. So those are my 3 knots. So that's hot and not. We'll see who is on it next week. Hopefully it will not be 3 pitchers again, but who knows? Could be. And then just some notes about the Tigers. They have been facing a couple injuries, especially on the pitching side of things this year. So that's another thing to take into consideration. 2 of your starters, Reese Olson and Casey Mize, who are both projected to be future starters for this team for the next couple of years, both injured. Reese Olson should actually be coming back soon. I'll have to check the date on that. And then Riley Green as well. I think he was just activated today before the game versus New York. He's been out for a couple weeks as well. And then to wrap up the baseball segment, we're gonna go to the ninth inning rally here. Just a brief summary of some things, Tigers related, most of the time. Also some other things. Spencer Torkelson is back in the majors. Spent a couple months down in the minors now, really struggled, but he was called up recently to add a bat to our lineup, and we'll see if the little break from the majors kind of reset his thought process, his mind, because he had a really good last year around this time. So we'll see if he can pick that up, provide a little bit more pop in the middle of the lineup for us. Recently we called up 2 of our top prospects, Jace Jung and Trey Sweeney were recently called up. Jace Jung is a third baseman. Trey Sweeney, I believe, is a shortstop, but can also play around the field. We'll use him more as a utility DH kind of guy. But that's exciting that you're seeing young guys come up. So far, they haven't done too bad in their first couple of matches up here. And then the last one I want to hit on is Javier Baez. Has he figured out his bat? I know that Javier Baez is not, the contract that we signed him to was not beneficial to our team whatsoever. And you want to root for the guy because just of his background coming from the Cubs. But it has been a rough go for him lately. But in the last 2 weeks, he seemed to have found his bat. I could be mistaken, and he could prove me wrong and go 0 for 12 over the next 3 games. That is an entirely real possibility. But for the most part, I think Javier Baez has found his swing. Now, the one thing I want to say about Javier Baez is that, and I know this doesn't count for much, but he adds an element to our team defensively that very few people can. Hitting wise, completely other end of the spectrum. There are a couple guys that can hit a lot better than he can. But defensively, he has made some great plays for us over the years. So to see him starting to pick up the bat, a couple homers over the last 2 weeks, really exciting to see. Also, in other news, Aaron Judge, the big star for the Yankees, picked up his 300th home run in under 1,000 games, which is very, 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 very impressive. He's the youngest player ever, or quickest player, I should say, ever to do that, beating the record by about 100 games, I think. So he's having a fantastic season. And that will conclude this episode segment of Ninth Inning Rally. Next time, I will have playoff races and other news around the MLB. And that will conclude this episode of the Motor City Roar. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, feel free to follow at the Motor City Roar podcast on Instagram. If you have any questions or anything you want me specifically to talk about in the next episode, feel free to DM me or leave a comment over there. This has been the Motor City Roar podcast. I'm your host, Josh Norman, guiding you through the good, the bad, and the ugly of Detroit sports. Until next time.